In the year 1629, this was Central Europe, a region composed of overlapping territories, jurisdictions, and inherited domains, known collectively as the Holy Roman Empire. The empire extended across hundreds of political entities, connected by law, tradition, and administrative continuity. There was no single center experienced by all. Along the Elbe River stood cities that functioned as commercial hubs and administrative anchors. One of them was Magdeburg. This is where the story takes place. At the center of this geography, cities functioned as stable units within a fragmented political order. They were not merely settlements, they were administrative systems. Built along rivers, trade routes, and inherited boundaries, these cities connected territory to authority. Their walls defined jurisdiction, their streets organized movement, their buildings expressed continuity. Nothing here suggested instability. Nothing announced disruption. The city stood, functioning, recognized, as it had for generations. Nothing here was in motion, and yet nothing was truly still. The structures remained, the roots remained, the flows remained. What had changed was not visible. Authority still existed, obedience still existed, but the relationship between them had begun to shift. Not through declaration, not through disruption, but through accumulation. The city continued to function. Goods moved, records were kept. Daily routines remained intact, not because they were questioned, but because they were familiar. Habit sustained the system. Nothing had stopped. Nothing had collapsed. Authority did not need to announce itself. It was already present, in stone, in height, in permanence. Civic buildings, church towers, administrative centers, visible reminders that order had a form and that form endured. Nothing had broken, nothing had been declared, and yet the conditions were already in place. The Holy Roman Empire still existed. It still had a name, laws, and titles. But governing no longer meant organizing the present. The center was still named. Its ability to act was not. Authority persisted as legal language, as institutional memory, as an inherited form. Many territories had learned to decide for themselves. The center still spoke, but it no longer organized daily life. Not only in worship, but in everyday life. Schools, councils, records, common words. When imperial administration attempted to intervene, it spoke of correction. For many cities, this sounded less like restoration and more like denial. Magdeburg stood at this precise point of tension. A free city, firmly Lutheran. It prospered by governing itself. It was not about deciding. It was about remaining. No one declared war, but language began to change. It was an ordinary late afternoon between the market and the river port when Johann Keller met Elias Brandt, the pastor of the city. They did not exchange long greetings. They spoke as if the conversation had already been unfolding for days. Johann said that troops had passed along the road. He said messengers arrived, too exhausted to explain everything. He said that sermons were no longer about salvation alone. Messengers arrived, too exhausted to explain everything. Their words were incomplete. Their sentences carried dust more than clarity. He said that sermons were no longer about salvation alone. Something had shifted in the tone. Not louder, not clearer, but different. Elias listened in silence, measuring the words before accepting them. Then he asked whether it was only rumor or whether something had shifted in the spirit of the city. Johann did not know how to answer. He only feared being used, feared fighting for words too large, causes defended by few and paid for by many. The pastor replied that when faith mixes with fear, it begins to search for signs where before there was only routine. Not every call arrives with a trumpet. Some arrive as habit. Repetition reshapes what feels evident. Words spoken often enough begin to sound unquestionable. And once they feel unquestionable, they no longer need to be announced. They simply guide. The two walked to a small square behind the church and sat down. Johann spoke again of his fear of being led without realizing it. Elias answered without raising his voice. Power rarely pushes people as one pushes an object. Power listens. It listens to what circulates in taverns, to what mothers repeat to their children, to what men say when they believe they are alone. When certain words are repeated often enough, they begin to feel natural. And once they feel natural, they no longer need to be ordered. Johann insisted no one had decided anything. The pastor corrected him. No one had decided formally, but everyone had grown accustomed. Ideas cease to be merely thoughts. They begin to inhabit people. And at a certain point, it is no longer men who defend an idea. It is the idea that acts through them. Governors fall, pastors die, but these forms of thought remain. Habits govern more than decrees. Every government begins inclined, sustained by what people have learned to recognize as evident. When Johann asked who would answer for the blood, Elias said that such a question always searches for a face. But here the movement was different. When no one pushes, no one can pretend to have been pushed. Responsibility begins in what is repeated without thought, in what is taught as nature, in what is passed on as invisible inheritance. Johann left carrying the weight of those words. Elias returned to the small chapel on the hill. From there, he observed Magdeburg, while to the city, not as isolated sounds, but as a body in motion. Footsteps, voices, doors, bells. Nothing was out of place. And yet, something felt denser. He wondered whether men would ever see what they now only felt. Not isolated ideas, but the whole of them, the density they gain when they confirm one another. It was not an event approaching, it was an inclination. Perhaps men did not wish to see it. To see would require care. Care with what is said, with what is repeated, with what is passed along as if it were natural. The bell rang at its usual hour, as it always had. Elias recognized what was coming. Not only the imminence of war, but something quieter. Certainty. The kind of certainty that allows men to defend causes and attack enemies before any formal command. A soldier passed on horseback. A child repeated a psalm learned too early. A door closed before nightfall. Nothing announced war, and yet everything suggested preparation. It is not the step that announces the march, he thought, but the rhythm learned beforehand. The city remained the same, but the air was different, carrying old words repeated once more, now with another intention. Magdeburg entered the war without knowing when it had begun. Elias wondered whether one day that network of thoughts, habits, opinions, unexamined certainties might take visible form. Not fixed, but shifting. Not measured in men, but in attention, in repetition, in echo. Perhaps by seeing it, men would gain awareness of what moves them. Or perhaps it would already be too late. Perhaps those networks had already become autonomous, organizing the world on their own, creating sides, enemies, urgencies, as if endowed with an intelligence without a face. How many wars will begin this way? Elias lowered his eyes. The answer was not in a distant future. It was here. The city, intact in its form, already crossed by a silent conviction. A war about to begin, not announced by trumpets, but sustained by dispersed protagonists, connected only by what they had learned to repeat.